the current incarnation of the band started to change in 2014, and you tell this great story about when Steve decided it was time to retire, there was only one name and one voice that you had in your head. And so I'm going to throw it over to you, and we're going to go from there.
Well, he wasn't available, so...
See you, Ronnie.
A few years previously, I had seen a band from Kansas City who I knew sort of, called Shooting Star, and we were playing the Moondance Jam in Minnesota. And I just thought I'd go over to the stage and just say hi to the guys. And there's a guy out in the front of the stage just singing his butt off, and just had the crowd in the palm of his hand. And I thought, wow, who is this guy? This guy's great. And so I met Ronnie, and I saw him occasionally when we play in the area. And I just kind of made a mental note, keep this guy in mind, because you never know. I mean, any one of us could suddenly... We've had people leave before, so I kind of made plans in case somebody does. And Steve just decided to retire, and I said to Phil, I got the guy. And the rest is rock and roll history.
Right.
And so, Ronnie, at the time, if I'm not mistaken, you weren't full-time in music. I think you were actually even driving a truck or something.
An 18-wheeler around the beautiful streets of Chicago.
So,
and it's lovely there right now, let me tell you.
So how'd they track you down? Did you think somebody was playing a joke on you? How'd you get the word?
Very interesting. A very good friend, longtime fan of mine, Dina, who happens to be Dennis DeYoung's niece. Longtime friend of mine, fan. Come home from work one day, and she sends me a text message. Did you see this? And it was the announcement of Steve Walsh's retirement. And at that time, you kind of think, well, they already have someone in line if they're announcing Steve's retirement. I'm sure they've been working with another singer by this time. And just on a fluke, I messaged Rich, because we were friends on Facebook. He was graciously became my friend after a lot of begging and pleading and a few checks. But I wrote Rich a message on Facebook. So, Rich, Ronnie from Shooting Star, give me some consideration. That's all I wrote. Very next day, I was home from work and ready to go to my ma's to pick up dog poop in the backyard like a good son does. You think I'm kidding? And I said, you know what, before I leave, I'm going to check my messages. And here I got a message from Rich. We're about to go on stage in Houston. If you get this within the next 2 hours, give me a buzz. So I called him, talked to Rich for a few minutes, said Phil would talk to me the next day, and that was Friday. I talked to Phil on Friday, flew me down to Atlanta on Monday. Tuesday morning, I'm right back in the 18-wheeler, driving in the lovely streets of Chicago, and got an email from Phil Tuesday morning. Congrats, you got the job, the band is pumped. And that was last week, or at least it feels like it.
So you didn't even have to go down and rehearse with them?
No, they made it abundantly clear to me, and Rich has said many times, we're not having you come down to audition. We know you could sing your butt off. We just want to know if you're a nice guy, and if we could just abuse the hell out of you for the rest of your life.
It was a personality test, really.
Well, I failed miserably, but they hired me anyway.
It is true that at the end of the day, the hang is the biggest part of it.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you can have the best players in town in a band, but if they're a bunch of jerks, it's just not going to last long. We spend so much time together that, I mean, if you take 6 friends and put them together in a room and start making music, you're going to have a good time. And maybe you'll make some really good music too. Put 6 jerks in a room, you're just going to have a fist fight. Yeah. So that's, the test really was to see, is this a guy we can be in the trenches with day in, day out? And so that it was more of a personality audition to see if he had lead singer's disease.
Right. LSD.
He doesn't.
And Zach, while we think Zach's the new guy, well, he's actually not the new guy. There's another new guy, but we'll talk about him later. But Zach is not entirely new. Zach goes back about 20 some odd years within the Kansas family when you got a hold of a fax number. Remember fax machines? You got a hold of a fax number.
How did you know that?
So I've heard. I have people in the right places.
I did. I'm going to do the condensed version of this because we'll be here all day. But I did in 2000 get hold of Phil Ehart's fax number, and I wrote him this long letter, and I told him, I'm Zach. I'm a I'm like, I'm a big fan of the band, and I write music, and I play guitar, and I play some keyboards, and I think I should be in Kansas. I mean, what a jerk I was saying that. And I faxed the letter to him, and I sent him all my contact info, fully expecting to never ever hear from him. And that very night, I owned and operated a recording studio in New Jersey at the time. And my phone rang that night, and the voice on the other end said, "Hey, can I speak to Zach, please?" And I said, "This is Zach." And he said, "Hey, this is Phil Ehart from Kansas." Literally, at first I didn't believe, and I said, "No, it's not." That's what I said, I swear to God. And he said, "Well, you can call me back and verify the number, but..." And the rest was history. I started sending him songs, and actually, that went on for 16 years, and I held out hope that I'd still get to be in the band. But when you joined, and the band went back to being a six-piece for the first time in years, that's when I gave up. When Ronnie joined, I was like, okay, well, now they don't need me. They don't need a sixth guy. So, okay, the dream is dead. I gave it a good shot. And then during the record, when I got asked, I was blindsided by it, but I did not expect.
How did you get excuse me.
Yeah, no.
Excuse me. How did you get to work with Jeff Glicksman? How did that come about?
Well.
How are you, Sal?
Man.
I told him it's not about me, so go ahead.
I met Jeff through Phil. I'd gotten to know Phil better and better over the first 4 or 5 years. And one day, actually my old band, a band called Forefront, we used to open up some shows for Kansas. The last time we played with Kansas, Phil came to me and said, "Do you know Jeff Glicksman?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "He's looking for a guy to work with, and I think you might be a good fit with him." So he introduced me to Jeff, and we hit it off, and I wound up working with him for 6 years. And that's kind of how that's when I really got to know Rich, and I got to know Billy a lot better. And who else is in the band? And Rags. I got to know Rags a lot better. So when I finally did join the band, it was actually really comfortable, because I already kind of knew everyone. It was a really easy transition. Everyone was really nice. So.
We started working on the Prelude Implicit, and Phil and I wanted somebody to help us with the production of it, and we'd been working with Zach for quite a while now, and he was a tremendous engineer, but we really wanted some help. He's very creative musically, and so we just needed someone to help us along with that. And so when we first started recording, Zach was offering ideas and suggestions, was in with us when we were doing all the writing. But we got in the studio, and Zach, we got an idea for Phil to have a drum beat, and then Zach would come back the next day with this song completely written. It's like, wow, this is really pretty interesting. And once we got in the studio and started recording, we weren't there a week, I'll bet, and me and Phil kind of looked at each other, we went outside and said, this guy needs to be in the band. If we're going to do more recording, which we are doing this year, actually. But Zach's got to be in this band. He's just got too much musical stuff in his head to offer. So we brought Zach outside, and poor Zach thought we were going to fire him.
I swear to God, actually, that's true. The night before, we'd had this big technical problem recording, and Phil was really upset, and everyone was really upset, and I was freaking out. I was like, man, I'm so fired. And the next day when I came in, Phil said, "I need to see you outside," It was like, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Kat.
So
Camp's here.
we come out, take him outside, and said, "Zach, how would you like to join the band?" "Yes." It didn't even come out of our mouth, and he didn't say how much. He didn't say it, he just said yes. And that answer told me all I needed to know. He was in 100%.
So, Zach, tell us about working on that album. Now, this had been their first attempt at an album in 16 years. So what was that whole process like for you? Here, and it probably was 16 years since you first started contacting Phil. I think you said somewhere around 2000. So
Yeah.
what was it like putting yourself in that role to be working with this band in the studio and inserting your ideas and lyrics and songs and all this stuff?
At first it was terrifying, honestly, because I was really intimidated, and I didn't know what to expect. I mean, I didn't know if, obviously these guys have been around for a while. They've made all these amazing records. I didn't know if it was going to be like we're going through the motions. I had no idea what it was going to be. But when we got in the studio, it was like a bunch of kids. I mean, we were motivated. We were fired up. We were having a great time. And it just all went by so fast because it was 6 really intense weeks of recording. We were basically
6 days a week,
6 days a week,
19
6
hours
weeks
a day, then going back to the hotel room and working on more.
Yep. And then, and coming back. So I didn't really have a lot of time to reflect during the process. It was just like, got to get this thing done. As soon as we got done mixing, we finished on Valentine's Day. What year was that? 2015. Yeah, 2015. I went right back to Jersey, took all the tracks and mixed for 6 weeks, and then joined the band and learned the show and went right on the road. So I don't know. It was great. I mean, it was a great experience. Whirlwind, exactly. That's the right word.
And your involvement in that album, obviously you contribute a lot with the lyrics and stuff.
It was the same. I think for Zach and I, it was just so intense, and him pulling double duty between writing and submitting music and engineering and producing, and then we went on like a writing sabbatical, and which we just set up everything in a circle in a conference room and just start throwing ideas around. And I mean, same thing for me. I mean, I was just so intimidated and so nervous, and it's like, okay, they're asking me to write lyrics, so I wrote With This Heart.
Yeah.
And
His head's already big enough, people.
But it was so neat for me to, because I was setting myself up for, gosh, this is what I wrote. I'm all prepared for them to say, this is really good. We really like this, but we're going to go over here. So I was all prepared for that. So imagine my excitement when, I submitted that to Phil and Rich, and there's like, wow, this is really good. Now start doing something for this one. Really? Well, start doing something for this one too, and this one too. And, ended up, I forget what it was. If I did
quite a
five
few.
or
At least
five or
five, yeah.
six, and then co-wrote 2 with Billy.
Yep.
And,
At least that
then
much.
there was, of course, Section 60.
Yes.
Zach's masterpiece, Section 60.
Well, no, hold on. We were about a week away from going into the studio. It was right after Christmas, and Phil called me and said, he goes, I know we're right up at the studio, but I got this idea, and I just want to run it by you and see if you can come up with something. So he told me he said, have you ever heard of Section 60? And I had not. And he told me what it was, and he told me all about it, and he sent me all these photos and YouTube links, and he said, go look at all this stuff and kind of fill up on this, and call me back and we'll talk. So I went, it was obviously...
Does everyone know what Section 60 is? No?
Yeah.
Section 60 is a part of Arlington National Cemetery.
Yep. And so I looked at all these materials that Phil sent me, and it was, deeply heartbreaking stuff. And he called me and said, look, can you come up with like a 3-minute piece? Think big, think majestic, think, heart-rendering. And I was like, okay, Phil, I think I can do this. And it came out like in 3 days, 4 days, just from looking at the photos and just playing the piano a little bit. And no one had even heard it when we went in the studio. It was just like a brand new thing we had kind of learned in the studio. And so yeah, that was an amazing thing that it came about like that, so definitely.
It's rare to be in the studio and to have created something and you sit back and listen to it, and full-grown men get weepy. It was very odd. David Ragsdale really had a hard time performing. He'd been practicing the violin part, which is the lead melody. And we got recording, and he kept breaking down. The song became very emotional to us, and the more we were digging into the story of it, it started getting even more personal all the time. And so for that tour, we incorporated that as a major part of the tour, was focused on that song. And that was, again, why we wanted Zach in the band, is just, I've got an idea about this thing, and, do this kind of that, and then, okay, I think I got it, and then here's a song. It's like, where does that come from? Pretty amazing, we were in awe of that moment.
So, Richard,
Thanks, Rich. That's really nice, man. Kidding.
So, Richard, two-part question here. Now, the band has no doubt been through numerous incarnations, guys coming and going and stuff like that. So, how difficult has it been, or maybe perhaps not, though, to keep it going? Did you and Phil ever just sit there and say, should we pull the plug? Do we try this one more time? So talk about that, and then I'll get to the second part of it.
I don't know why. I've always known this, but when I first started playing guitar and playing in just local bands and things, this is what I was meant to do. I've never felt, I don't mean to sound cocky about this, but it sounds entitled. But this is my job. This is what I do. This is what I was meant to do. This is where I belong. I'm a good guy in a band with, because I'm a team player. So I've always been very comfortable in this. This is what I will always do. Mm-hmm. And so when are you going to retire? And do what? This is the greatest job on earth. Yeah. There is. Right. And so Phil and I have never had the conversation, you still want to keep doing, I don't know, I kind of like playing golf. And no, this is my life. It's not my job. Yeah. And so that's part one. There have been a lot of people come and go, some for health reasons, some because they just didn't want to do it anymore. Right. It's to do this for a lifetime. You can have people that do this for 20 years. I've had enough. That's just not me. I'm not bragging, but I will have enough when I'm dead. Mm-hmm. Until then, this is what I do. Yeah. And okay. Phil's there with me.
And then the second part of that is, because the way I'm viewing, our session here this morning is a rebirth. It's a brand new day for Kansas, and that's why I was happy to see that that Ronnie and Zach were going to be here, because, have them talk about their roles in all this and bringing out their personalities and everything. But to that end, how did you and Phil then, what was, marching orders is not the right word, but, how did you sort of define their roles? Okay, this is how, the new stuff, sure, you're part of it, great, it's yours, your personality's there. How did you fit them into the catalog material, and how did you explain how you wanted them to, join in the process of performing those songs live?
There's no process to it.
Well, in other words, did you say, Zach, you got to play note for note the way this was. Ronnie, you got to sing it the same way that it was on the albums.
There is a certain reverence that we try to always pay to the music as written, but there's also wiggle room in there for everybody to express themselves. Mm-hmm. We don't want to be a jukebox and do it identical, but still, you do keep it in the ballpark. But as far as writing, all of those things, there's not any dictation. As for like when we're working on new material, I've been in a situation before where you had more of a dictatorial process. This is my song, nobody touches it. Right. That's awkward. So Phil and I, what we definitely want to do is, anybody has an idea, you can have the dumbest idea ever. Let it out. Let's suss it out. Let's try it. Oh, that sucked. And everybody laughs about it and you move on. Mm-hmm. But we try everything. Everybody gets a voice. Everybody gets a chance to at least try their idea out. And sometimes it's tough on a songwriter and tough on your idea. But you have to have a kind of thick skin, mm-hmm. because sometimes people say, wow, boy, that part sucks. And you just don't laugh about it and move on. Yeah. But everybody has to have an equal voice in that creative process. No dictators allowed in this band.
Over to you.
I think Zach will agree with me on this. Talking about having to stay within the perimeters of Kansas or the Kansas feel or the Kansas flavor. My entire life, I've been, since the very first Kansas song I heard in 75 or 76 when I was very small. Zach and I have both been so influenced by Kansas that no matter what we do, there's going to be an element of Kansas in it. It just comes out naturally because you're a product of your influences. You're a product of your inspirations. So, I mean, I attribute the development of my voice from listening to Steve Walsh and Steve Perry. That's how I acquired my voice, from trying to emulate those guys. And listening to Kansas and being so influenced by Kansas, it can't help but come out of you.
And then, so Zach, here you are stalking Phil.
Stalking by fax.
Stalking by all these years ago.
My autobiography.
What's a fax machine?
What did you, even going back to then, what did you feel that you had in you that you could contribute to this band? You obviously, you had a big desire in your heart to want to do this with these guys.
Okay, so I haven't really told a lot of people this part of the story. I actually got that fax number 2.5 years before I sent him the fax. It was in 1999 that I got that number. And I remember thinking I should get in touch with Phil, but then I'm not kidding, I really said, I'm nobody. I mean, who the hell am I? I'm not going to bother this guy. That's Phil Ehar. He's one of my favorite drummers, one of my favorite bands. I'm not going to bother him. I don't really have anything I can offer. So I took that number and I stuck it on my wall. And it sat there for 2.5 years. And then in February of 2001, I got an email from a complete stranger, a guy who his name was Steve Albanese. He ran a record store in Providence, Rhode Island, and he was a big fan of my band, Forefront. And he wrote me a letter saying, hey man, I just wanted to let you know I really love your CD, and I see in the liner notes for your CD that you're a big Kansas fan, and I think you'd be the perfect sixth guy for Kansas. And I was just like, holy cow, no one had ever said that to me before, ever. And so that day, 2.5 years later, I was like, okay, now I'm doing it. And that's when I got the letter off the wall and sent it to Phil. So I actually have no self-confidence at all. It took the prodding of a stranger to get me to do that. I don't know that I would ever have done it any other way. So Steve, if you ever find this out, I love you, man. It's true.
That's a great story. It really is.
It's absolutely true.
And so you all come together for the Prelude Implicit. Not a simple album title, not like Kansas Now or, the Prelude Implicit. I won't even, it must, who came up with the title?
Phil came up with that.
Phil came up with
Phil will sit down and he'll write up hundreds of titles just in times off. Yeah. Something will come to his mind and he'll write it down. And then when it starts getting closer and closer to album time, he'll start weeding things out. Then Rich, what do you think? This one. We'll start going through the list. Mm-hmm. And that one started sticking out because of where we were in the career with the new band and all that. Wanted to make a definitive statement, Prelude, the beginning of a musical something that was very important.
Right.
And Implicit being an absolutely.
Yeah.
And that started becoming our mantra, as we marched forward in creating this album. It's funny how a title, you start to fit the name that you'd given yourself. Mm-hmm. And that we moved on from there.
Yeah. So the album comes out, right to number 4, Billboard Top 200. Not bad. No pressure. But it had to make the two of you come on, that's, you couldn't have a bigger welcome mat than that to get things going. And then to help promote the album, Left Overture 40th Anniversary Tour starts out as 10 shows. We'll kind of experiment, see how it goes. Close to 80 shows around the country and stuff. So, which had to be quite interesting for the two of you, because now here you are, you're promoting the new stuff, which you had major roles in, and paying homage to the older material. What was that whole dynamic like for the two of you?
I mean, for me, it was just like, I'm going to get to play magnum opus. That was like the highlight of the whole thing for me. It was just so awesome. But, I mean, that record, it's one of the greatest records ever made. And, I mean, yeah, what can I say about it? I mean, it was thrilling to get to do it. You know.
And any challenges on there for you, Ronnie? I mean, wrap your head around
Only
that material.
from the very start to the very end.
Oh, yeah. With the middle thrown in too, I hope.
Right.
Yeah.
Just again, I mean, Left Overture. I mean, I play the death out of that album time after time after time, and it's funny how your mind is already anticipating the next song, and I'd look out at the audience, and even though we finished Wayward Son, they knew what was next. They knew what was next, and the excitement was still there, and just to sing all those songs, I mean, just fantastic.
And go ahead, Richard.
Well, from my perspective, always being there, I don't go back and listen to old recordings from top. You know, you go back to learn something, but to suddenly play it in the running order, which is something we never did. We never played all the songs on it. It's very odd to be standing there in the middle of it, in some ways hearing it for the first time, because a lot of this stuff, it's like, oh man, this is cool. Why did this follow this? Oh, that's right, because there was two sides. So this was the opening of side B. All of those things to play it in running order. It was a weird position to be kind of listening to yourself for the first time in a different way. We were so very surprised with the success of the tour. Of course, it was 10 to 15 shows. It turned into over 80. Well, we had another album coming up after that was pretty big. So we thought, well, next tour we'll probably do the Point and Return tour. And so we started that last year. It's going to go all this year, and we're already booking that tour into 2020. So this is really working well for us. I don't know we're not sure what's going to be next. New album. There's just, with this group of guys, no is not an answer to anything. It's you guys want to play this? Sure, let's do it. How about this? Yes, let's do that. So whatever we want to do, we can and we will. And that's the most exciting aspect for me of at any point in ever being in this band, is the ability to create anything new or play anything old at any time.
What was it like for you to go for Left Overture and Point of No Return? Did you actually have to go back, put on the album, or some guys do, and others they kind of could remember stuff note for note, remember everything about it, but most would have to go back and refresh. What was it like for you, Richard? Did you have to do that?
Like Magnum Opus, I played it a lot, but there's a lot of notes in there, and some of them are not. They're very unconventional parts, and so you eventually muscle memory will kick in. You just kind of, where did I play that on the neck? And all of a sudden you find, and there it is. But it's still, you have to go back. I had questions in my childhood. We've never played that before, and it's a piano, bass, drums, basically song, and it's a vocal performance, little violin in the center. But we worked it out. There's some acoustic in the background, so played acoustic on it. We found Zach's really good at like listening to something, going, I don't need to play anything here, and I can support this here. Zach would like double violin lines a lot, which suddenly the melody of the violin with the guitar backing, it just jumps off the stage. So we have to do different arrangements to try to stay as true to the album as possible, but nobody likes to just stand on the stage, you need something to do. And so every song was a little bit different. A lot of the songs we played, but like Crosby Chronicles, say, we haven't played in a while, so that's hard to remember some of the parts of that, because it's a little tricky. So every song is different, every album is different in that way.
Especially Point. I think Point is harder than Left Overture. I mean,
I don't know why, but it
really
is harder.
Yeah, it's it took me like 3 times longer to learn all these songs.
Lightning's Hand is booger. It's hard. It was hard then. It is at least as hard now. That's a tough one to play.
And so, Zach, when you say learning them, so now what's that learning process like? Are you locking yourself in a room with just a guitar and an amp and
No. There's no amps. I sit in my living room at my coffee table with a big cup of coffee and my laptop, and this program called the Amazing Slowdowner that allows you to slow stuff down, so you can, because there's no way I'd figure out all this stuff in something like Lightning's Hand if I didn't have some help. So I just
when
sit
there's
there.
a zillion notes and
exactly.
a measure.
I know. That song never stops. It just keeps going the whole way. So yeah, I'll slow it down, and as slow as I need to, and I just sit there and try to figure out, what was Kerry playing, what was Rich playing, what should I play? If I'm not sure, I'll call Rich, and which part should I play? There are a lot of lines and harmonies and things on point that we had a powwow about to try to figure out who was going to play what. A hell of a lot of notes on that record.
And that came out in 1978, right, Richard?
77.
So
That sounds about right, yeah.
78, the height of disco, and here comes this album that goes on to sell 6 million copies, 3 hits, songs that still get played on the radio every day to this very day. It's incredible, and with all those notes thrown into it too. Nothing, no simple pop songs here is what I'm saying.
And what's most memorable about those times on the road, because of the times, get done with the show, go back to the hotel, go down to the lounge. Yeah, playing the Enormo Dome in whatever city. Yeah. And you come back into town, and I can't get into the bar to get a drink because I'm not wearing a friggin' leisure suit. It was like, what a world.
Yeah, well, I the neighborhood I lived in Brooklyn is where Saturday Night Fever was filmed.
I'm sorry.
And, I was the only one without, we used to call them DAs, duck ass, whatever, DAs. I had a full afro.
Hey, how you doing?
Denim jacket. Absolutely fine. Everything's fine, yeah. I had all the, Kansas patches, Sticks patches, Cheap Trick written down the back of the denim jacket. I was complete, anti all that stuff. Thank God it didn't last too long. It kind of, after a while. Matter of fact, no one cares, but this is a funny story, though. 2001 Odyssey, where they filmed the dance scenes for that film. My first time I ever went in there was see Twisted Sister, and they took out a coffin, put it on stage, and they threw the disco records in and just blew the whole damn thing up. I was like, that was my one and only time in that club. All right, so this complete brand new rebirth, as I've been calling it, of Kansas. You've got this tour going, and you now announced that in August you'll be going in to record a new album, which is just tremendous news for a number of reasons. So what's the game plan now for this? What is anything you can kind of fill us in on? Is there already writing and recording going on? Are we in sort of pre-production mode, or how does that all work out?
It's strictly writing stage. We did another sabbatical where we went to undisclosed location for a week, and we start writing and just start throwing out. Part of this is we're just somebody have an idea for a chord structure or a little riff or something, and those get cataloged. And then there's songs that have already been started to be written, and we started learning those. And like, what if we did this here, and what about that? Oh, I've got an idea. That's where these moments happen.
And the new secret weapon, Tom Brislin.
Oh, yeah.
Ah, yes, the new keyboard player.
We haven't even introduced Tom into the writing equation yet. But so we're probably, 2/3 into the album or more?
Yeah, I'd say 2/3.
Yeah. So next process is just start learning things, going in and recording, starting the recording process, and we'll get started. I guess it's going to be next spring when it's released. But it's always, we're not sure what it's going to be yet. We didn't know with Prelude Implicit what's this going to be, and it's a frightening aspect. But we've kind of done this before, where it's like, I hope this is going to be good. But when we get everybody together, if something isn't working, we always find our way out of it. If either can this one, or what if we? And those are the best moments. Is when there's a problem and somebody just says, I've got an idea. What if we take out this part? We make it halftime, and we do this turnaround, and so suddenly it all works. And that's what happens when you get everybody in a room just throwing ideas around.
And there's a reason, not to frost your cake, there's a reason why this gentleman here, Mr. Rich Williams, is a rock and roll guitar god. Because when we were recording the Prelude Implicit, he'd be sitting in the lounge or sitting in the other room, and he'd be doing stuff on guitar that I never heard a guitar player do before. And it's that imagination that just, inspires that musical thought, and the greatest things come out of it. And I was just so impressed with, of course I knew Rich was a great guitar player. I've only been listening to him my entire life. But recording the Prelude Implicit and listening to Rich in the studio was just such a treat. And then to have this guy come in, Mr. Lightning Fingers, and to listen to both of them. Sometimes I forgot what I was supposed to be doing because I'm so enthralled with what they were doing.
Oh,
Yeah.
What I think is wonderful is because, my 9-to-5 job is covering the world of classic rock and providing content on, it's been paying the mortgage, so there's someone there. But, so here it was just 3 years ago that Kansas put a brand new album out. And I remember you guys, we were just talking backstage. We had you in the iHeart Theater in New York, and I said, what was that, last year? And I go, 2 years ago already. I'm like, wow, that was fast. So they came, they performed in this little intimate theater we have that's much smaller than this intimate theater, and did a Q&A. And all of a sudden I read, they're going back in to do another album. That doesn't happen anymore. It would normally take another 15 or 16 years for any, dare I say, classic rock band to even attempt to do another album. So the fact that you're doing one so quickly in the way, it works today with, singles and downloads and everything else, I think that says a lot about you guys. And obviously you feel very strongly about the chemistry that's in this bottle right now.
Thank you. Making records is not what it used to be. Record companies were giants, and there was money to burn everywhere. Now there is no money in making a record. That revenue stream dried up. But the desire to make one is as strong as ever. So for us to be relative, not only to you guys, but to ourselves, we have just an innate urge and need to be creative. And if we don't do that, it's disturbing. It's fun to go out and play and do all the new shows and year after year. But when you don't get the opportunity to create and record that, there's something extremely important missing. And so we will record anyway, whether or not there's not going to be a bucket of money at the end of the process. You hope to break even. But the desire is unchanged. We got to do it. We've got to create. And to have these guys again, that everybody's just so dedicated into that aspect, knowing that there's not going to be a boatload of money at the end of this train. It's just going to be the opportunity to play new music. And that's why
See ya.
So it might just be me sitting here at the end of the stage. 10 years from now, who knows?
But Zach, for you now here it is, okay, that we talked about Prelude Implicit, where you behind the scenes and then got made a member and stuff. Did they take you in the back room, cut your finger, give the blood oath and everything? But now do you feel there's added pressure on you this time now because you are a full member of the band, you are taking a big bulk of the writing process going into this? What's your thought process right now?
Yeah.
Why do you have such a look of fear on your face?
See, the difference between the last record and this one is that 4 songs totaling about 23 minutes of music I actually wrote in 2001 and 2002 and sent to Phil way back. And when the record came up, Phil asked me, do you still have those songs and can we still use them? And so I had this incredible 23-minute head start. And I wasn't even in the band, so I had a lot of time to write, and I already had this stuff. But for this record, it was from scratch while I'm on the road with the band now, when we're playing, we're out 200 days a year or something like that. So in that way, it's a little scary, because it's hard to write on the road, and so I try to use the blocks of time that I have at home to get stuff done. So yeah, it's a bit of a rush for the finish line, but
We were going to start this last year.
yeah.
And it's just, we were too busy on the road to even give it any, what about that album? Well, shit,
Yeah.
We've been on the road all year. There hasn't been any time to even consider it.
And then, Ronnie, when did you get involved in terms of lyrics and stuff like that? Is it do you get fed pieces of music, or is there a finished, musical bed, if you will, and that's where you sort of have a go at it? You keep a book of lyrics. What's your whole writing process
on
like?
TPI, it was really our writing sabbatical. When we first did that, it was just so intense, and it's good to have that, for me anyway, to have that pressure to create, because you get into a zone and you start, for me anyway, I developed a process, and it's kind of like a process of elimination, and you work on certain buzzwords here and there, and things just start to roll. So for me, it's not, sure, I collect ideas over time. I'll think of a title and how to, write the content around that title. Thank you, Brian Adams, for that. But when we were in TPI and listening to the music right there in the element and how it was being created, it influences your mind lyrically.
What is this song saying?
Yeah.
You get a feel for the mood of it, and you start, well, what if here's how we should go in the direction.
Yeah.
And that first step of, not so much what the word is more what is the thought. Where do we want this to go? What do we want to say here? And that's the hardest part, is getting to that point. And then the words start to come out.
Yeah.
And Richard, first of all, how is Kerry doing? I know he had a health issue a couple of years back. How is he?
Well, Kerry had a stroke. It's been several years now. He's recovered as much as he's going to. He plays some guitar, but his right hand it never came quite back. He plays keys. He still works. He has a studio on his farm in Kansas, and he's still in the recording process. His wife Vicky has had some issues recently, but she's doing well again.
Good.
We keep in touch.
Because I didn't know if he was, still feeding some music ideas your way and stuff. Because I know he had done that for a while.
The reason we didn't record for 16 years was after the last time we did with Kerry in 2000. Kerry had no interest in doing any more Kansas material. He was doing stuff on his own, and he said so. Steve had lost the interest in recording new material. I don't want to do this anymore. Steve sold his equipment to record. So for 16 years, we just played the stuff that we did. We recreated ourselves with the symphony and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And that was all very fun. But we did a band called Native Window. It was and that was really born out of the frustration of not doing anything new. And the rule was, we can't do anything like Kansas. We don't want to do that. So if it starts to sound, we got to take a turn in the other direction. But that was really just our frustration and not being creative. So I got off on a jag. What was the original question?
No. You answered it. No, if I was just asking how Kerry was and if he might be, filtering in a couple ideas to you behind the scenes. But no.
Steve and Kerry just have made it clear they have no interest in sending anything. So going into the Prelude Implicit, okay, we want to make an album. We've got a great band. This is going to be cool. How are we going to do it? We have the desire, but the two major songwriters have been out of the band, one of them for almost 30 years. They have no interest in providing any material, so we'll just write it ourselves. There's no pressure there. But as we started working, and we learned it just in the native window process, that, we just sit around and talk and sit around in chairs and go through things. It just started to work. So it was a lot of pressure because we had no idea if we could do it. Can we do this? And as the ball started rolling, and then Zach gets involved, and it's like, oh yeah, we can do it just fine. And so now we have a lot more confidence going into this next project, knowing that even something I like the idea of what this is, but we know that we're going to take it to a really good place.
Right.
So there's a confidence we have going into this that we didn't have before. Doesn't mean we're not still scared shitless, but it's always a scary process to just lay yourself out there, because you're only as good as the last thing you did.
Absolutely.
People go, that's okay, but it's nothing like the old days where that's hard to live up to.
Yeah. Yeah. For those of you just filtering into the theater, we're the opening act for The Outlaws. It's Sal and the Kansas Tones, and we're just doing a little Q&A here, and we'll be wrapping up shortly. So just have a seat, relax, and enjoy it. And,
I did have something to add. You had Dave Davies on earlier. Our very first tour, we went out with the Kinks. We did like 4 dates. The first place we played was called the Celebrity Theater. It was in Phoenix. And similar to this, except it goes all the way around. Round stage in the center. Round like this. Well, I'm blind. With one eye, I have no depth perception. And so we came on the stage one way. There's a set of stairs, but the thing spins. And so we're finished. And I see these spokes, like this spoke going up here. This is all I knew. I came up that one. Well, shit, it was behind me. I'm waving, still got my 335 around my neck, and I just walked right off the stage. And it was just like, somehow I landed on my feet. And I was, fuck, what do I do now? I walked straight up the aisle, kind of. And it was and if there would have been a janitor's closet up there, I would have gone in. And when the Kinks were finished, then I would have come up. Anybody here? I will see that on my deathbed. Believe me. Worst experience of my career was our first show.
That was good.
That's pretty funny stuff. Well, you guys got your work cut out for you. You got a big tour this year, heading into record a second album, which is we're looking forward to it. So, do you have any titles in the works or anything like that, or is Phil got the book?
I know the title. You can't drag it out of me.
I will not.
No, that's not the title. I mean, you can't drag the title out of me.
I like it.
And I got a few more things of notes, but I'm just going to cut to one thing here because we're going to have to bring this to an end. And yeah, unfortunately, I'm sorry, but seems to be, and you've heard this before. Some of you have heard it. I think Richard, perhaps you may have heard it from one of my interviews with you in the past. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has not come knocking Kansas's way, and that's a very big omission. And just curious, I mean, does it matter to you? Do you care? I mean, I just was on this cruise last week.
They're brain dead.
Yeah, and well, we know that. And Todd Rundgren ripped them a new you-know-what and basically said, he goes, look, just to show you how political or BS it could be, he goes, I come in third in the fan vote, and they pick 2 ahead of me and 2 or 3 behind me. They know that I have no interest. I will never show up if I am lucky enough to get in. I hope that they don't nominate me again. Okay, well, yeah, fine, man. That's his take on it. But I'm curious, for you, is that something, are awards important to Kansas, or it doesn't, I mean, life goes on regardless, but I'm just curious of your take on it.
It's an important thing, and I don't know why. The idea of a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, that's what a wonderful idea. but the thought and the reality, they just don't match up in any way. For the fans, for the legacy of Kansas, yes, it's important. For my children and grandchildren, for family, this is what your grandpa did. That is important to me. For me personally, I could give a shit. I am very aware of what we've done. I'm very humbled by my experience with this. I'm in awe of what Kansas has done. I'm not in awe of myself in any way, but once in a while, when you kind of look up from the guitar because you're working and you think about all you've done, it's like, that's just too big for me. I really don't grasp all that. To end that thought, John Elefante, who was a singer with us the first time Steve Walsh left the band, I read an interview with him once. It was one of the best, most accurate things I think anybody has ever said to describe us. He said, what was it like to be in Kansas? And he goes, I was a really big fan, and one thing that struck me about those guys is they never ever knew how big they were. And I thought, that's the most accurate statement about this band that I've ever heard, because we still don't. I just like to play guitar in a good band, and this is fun. I never think about the Hall of Fame and awards and things like that. So for the legacy, for you guys, I'd love to be there, but for me, I'm good.
Yeah.
Well, I mentioned that Point of No Return alone only sold 6 million copies, and add to that all the other sales from all the other albums, and the fact that Carry On Wayward Son is one of the top 5 most played songs on classic rock radio. Dust in the Wind has been played more than 3 million times on the radio, and this doesn't even include streams and all the other things that kids do today. So, I think it's pretty accurate that a lot of people feel the same way, that Kansas should get their due. If just for the fact that you've, in a way, created your own genre of music. There's no one that sounds like you guys. I mean, it's a diverse musical mishmash, if you will. So you got my vote.
Well, thank you.
Anyway, this has been a lot of fun. Ronnie and Zach, thanks for bringing so much to the conversation this morning. Richard, I know you always do. You're always on your A game. Kansas is going to be back on this stage tonight at 8 o'clock. And for those of you who enjoy these little Q&As, Roger Daltrey at 7:45 in Studio B. He's going to, once he's done with his show, he's going to come talk to the audience for a little bit. So you've got, Kansas, Roger Daltrey. I don't know, your choice, but you can't go wrong either way. Guys, thank you very much.